Yo, Atlas speaking and welcome to part 5 of What If I Was Reborn in Attack on Titan as a civilian nobody with the gamer system. Let the tale begin. Chapter 81, You've been hiding in the basement to avoid the Titans, haven't you? You're smart, Emer. You must be starving, come, eat something. As if she'd found a faint light in endless darkness, Petra's gentle voice carried warmth that Emer hadn't felt in a long time. The girl hesitated, her expression caught between fear and disbelief. Petra's motherly instinct only grew stronger at the sight. She smiled softly, guiding Emer closer to the fire where the food was being warmed. Seeing this tender exchange, Aluo and Gunther couldn't help but smile faintly, the tension that had been suffocating the air easing for the first time in days. But not everyone shared that lightness. Locke, seated quietly near the window, had his eyes fixed on the girl, a subtle frown crossing his face. Aluo, who noticed first, leaned toward him and whispered, "Locke, what's wrong with that girl?" Locke's lips twitched slightly. "It's hard to tell for now," he said in a low tone. "But keep an eye on her." "Got it," Aluo murmured back, though confusion flickered in his eyes. Locke didn't explain further. His mind was already racing, because he recognized her. Emer. Once, a nameless beggar on Marley's streets. She had been used by zealots who called her a reincarnation of the ancient founder and raised her as a false prophet. When Marley discovered the cult, she had taken the blame herself, calling out her own name to protect the others. Her reward was a syringe of Titan spinal fluid and 60 years of wandering the island as a mindless Titan. Until one fateful day, when she devoured the previous Jaw Titan and regained her human form. Now, here she was again, before the story had reached that point. Jaw Titan, so she's already here, Locke thought grimly. Then Reiner and the others must be close. Maybe even inside Walrose by now. He didn't reveal any of this to the others. To him, Emer was both a danger and an opportunity, a Titan shifter who might be turned to humanity's side. Unlike the Marleyan warriors, Emer wasn't a soldier bound by orders. She was a free soul, persecuted, scarred, and searching for meaning. And Locke knew that deep inside, Emer wasn't heartless. She'd once chosen to return to Marley, giving up her freedom, all for the sake of Historia. A tragic fate, but a noble one. It was this understanding that made Locke cautious but also curious. He didn't need to expose her, not yet. She might become an ally worth keeping. As Petra continued to comfort the girl, Locke's thoughts grew darker. She hasn't met Krista yet. I wonder if she's already capable of feeling that attachment. No, it's too early. Still. He gave a small sigh and muttered under his breath, if Petra can reach her heart, that could be useful. Moments later, Emer, now calmer and fed, was officially taken in as a survivor. Under Petra's care, she gradually opened up, though she avoided Locke's gaze more than once. Her addition seemed to breathe new life into the group. The long silence that had hung over them since leaving Trost was finally broken by laughter and small talk. Even a spark of hope returned, the first survivor found. Maybe there were more. Locke, watching quietly, couldn't resist a smirk. If only they knew the survivor they're cheering for is actually a Titan. He leaned back against the wall, arms crossed, his sharp gaze occasionally landing on Emer. She must have felt it, every time she caught his eyes, her heart tightened. It was as though he could see straight through her. No matter how she tried to hide it, she felt utterly transparent before him. Petra noticed her unease and tried to lighten the mood. While checking the perimeter that evening, Emer hesitantly asked, "Sister Petra, what kind of person is Captain Locke?" Though she'd wandered for decades as a mindless Titan, she had regained her youthful form, and her mind remained that of the girl she once was. It made it easy for her to act naive, something that served her well now. Petra, walking ahead, smiled. "Locke? He's strong, no, incredibly strong. His talent even rivals Captain Levi's. Give him time, and he'll surpass him. He might become the strongest human alive." "The strongest?" Emer blinked, caught off guard. She glanced toward the young man walking ahead, calm, silent, his cloak swaying with the wind. He didn't look particularly imposing, certainly not like someone who could rival humanity's strongest soldier. Petra's tone softened as she added, on his first mission outside the walls, he killed nearly 20 Titans by himself. Not just killing them, he did it cleanly, efficiently. You don't forget that kind of skill. Her words carried quiet pride. As she spoke, her eyes lingered on Locke's back, not broad, but steady and unwavering. To her, that back meant safety. To Emer, it was the opposite. Her expression stiffened, and unease settled deep in her chest. How could someone like that exist, someone so young, yet so calm in the face of Titans? This man is dangerous, she thought. Too dangerous. A flicker of regret crossed her eyes. Maybe revealing herself had been a mistake. Before she could dwell on it further, a distant rumble shook the air. The sound grew louder, the earth itself trembling beneath their feet. Locke's head snapped toward the horizon, eyes narrowing. Titans! A faint roar echoed from the direction of Shiganshina district. Dust rose in the distance, the ground vibrating like a drum. Positions! Locke barked. His team immediately shifted into formation, ODM gear hissing to life. Emer's body tensed instinctively. She wasn't afraid of Titans, not truly, but the sight of them triggered memories she'd buried for decades. From the rooftop vantage point, Locke could already see the silhouettes, dozens of Titans shuffling through the ruined streets of Shiganshina. Some dragged themselves, others leaned against fallen walls, but all were converging in their direction. Looks like they gathered near the old gate, ELD muttered. Then that's where we'll start, Locke replied. His tone was sharp but calm, as if he were simply stating a fact rather than walking into battle. Petra, stay near Emer. She's still weak. Everyone else, prepare for engagement. Understood. The team sprang into motion, their maneuver gears slicing through the darkening sky. Gas hissed, blades gleamed, and Locke's heart steadied into the rhythm of combat, the one place where everything made sense. From behind him, Emer watched in awe as the group soared forward, 5 bright streaks cutting through the twilight. They're insane, she whispered, half in fear, half in admiration. Locke didn't look back. His voice carried over the wind. Remember this, Emer, this is what it means to fight for humanity. And then he was gone, diving straight into the swarm of Titans. Chapter 82. Compared to the events that would unfold in the year 850, the current situation was relatively calm. Wall Maria had only recently fallen. Though Reiner and his companions had deliberately lured Titans into the breach, their numbers were still far fewer than what would plague the island 5 years later. That was both a blessing and a curse. Locke and his squad had fought fewer than 10 skirmishes in total while advancing toward the entrance of the Shiganshina district, the southern edge of Wall Maria. Their mission wasn't to slay Titans, after all. Supplies were limited, and the gas tanks for their ODM gear could only carry so much. Every battle was a risk, every engagement a drain. So they avoided unnecessary confrontations and advanced with calculated precision. Petra, are we really going in there? Emer's voice trembled as she looked toward the shattered gate and the towering figures shambling beyond. Having grown up in Marley, Emer knew exactly what those creatures were, and what horrors lay within them. Her instinct screamed at her to run. But Petra's hand tightened around the reins. Stay close. Don't run, Petra said firmly. Locke and the others will handle the Titans ahead. Handle them? Emer's disbelief slipped through. Even knowing what Locke was capable of, facing so many Titans at once seemed suicidal. She couldn't even transform here, not without revealing her secret. Petra misread the fear in Emer's eyes as simple panic and offered a soft smile. Don't worry. If it's too much, we'll fall back. We won't take unnecessary risks. It was true. If not for the dozen or so Titans clustered at the narrow entrance to Shiganshina, Locke would have chosen to bypass the fight entirely. But the path forward was blocked. Before Emer could respond, the sharp hiss of compressed gas cut through the air. Locke, ELD, Gunther, and Aluo shot upward, trailing steel cables and vapor. The sight of humans soaring effortlessly through the air froze Emer where she sat. She had never seen ODM gear before. Her mouth fell open in shock as the squad spun between rooftops, each movement precise and deadly. Petra exhaled slowly, guiding her horse to a safer distance. If Emer weren't with them, she would have joined the fight herself, but someone had to stay back and guard the lone survivor they'd rescued. Locke had agreed, revealing Emer's identity now wasn't part of the plan. Focus on watching the perimeter, Petra told her gently. Locke had no time for anything but the battle. Using the remnants of the city wall as his anchor, he propelled himself forward with unrelenting speed. ELD and the others coordinated seamlessly, creating diversions while Locke dove for the kill. The air filled with the shriek of cables and the hiss of blades slicing flesh. A Titan turned just as Locke's twin blades flashed. The ultra-hard steel cut clean through its nape, bursting in a spray of steaming blood. Locke landed against the side of a collapsed house, reloaded his gas canister with a sharp click, and launched again. "Damn, he's fast," Aluo muttered, his eyes wide even as he maneuvered through another turn. "Fast?" "He's insane," Gunther shouted back, barely ducking under a Titan's reaching hand. "More like a monster himself," ELD added under his breath, though there was unmistakable admiration in his tone. The squad fought like an extension of Locke's rhythm, fluid, efficient, fearless. One by one, the Titans fell. Locke's movements were ruthless, but calculated, each strike a blur, each kill decisive. His blades glowed faintly in the sunlight, dripping Titan blood as he twisted through the air like a storm made flesh. Encouraged by his momentum, the others pushed harder, their fear melting away. For the first time in days, their movements carried confidence, even a hint of pride. Within minutes, the entrance was cleared. More than a dozen Titans lay motionless, their steaming corpses marking the squad's deadly precision. Locke had slain 6 on his own. The rest were shared between ELD, Aluo, and Gunther. When the last body hit the ground, Locke landed lightly near Petra and Emer. His uniform was streaked in Titan blood, his breath steady despite the battle. "Follow me," he ordered simply, mounting his horse. Petra galloped up beside him, glancing at the crimson stains across his cloak. "Locke, are you hurt?" He flashed a quick, reassuring grin. "All Titan blood. I'm fine." But to Emer, that smile was far from comforting. The steam rising from his gear and the cold precision in his eyes made him look more terrifying than the Titans themselves. So this is humanity's power. Her gaze shifted to Petra's waist, to the compact metal device, the coils of wire, the sharp blades. A glint of longing appeared in her eyes. She couldn't transform here. But if she could master this gear, she wouldn't have to rely on Titan power to survive. That thought burned in her mind as she silently followed the group into the outskirts of Shiganshina. The once proud district now lay in ruin. Houses collapsed upon each other like broken ribs, and the streets were filled with the remains of lives that had once thrived here. From the high ground near the inner gate, Locke surveyed the city below. Hundreds of Titans wandered through the ruins, some small and sluggish, others towering, grotesque, their shadows stretching long across the debris. "Damn!" ELD murmured. "It's worse than I imagined." Gunther exhaled sharply beside him. "It's like a graveyard." Aluo kept silent, his jaw tight. Even he, known for his cocky remarks, could find no words. Locke said nothing. He watched the city for a long moment, eyes narrowing slightly. Every movement of the Titans, every path they took, he committed to memory. Recklessness had no place here. A single mistake could doom them all. Petra guided her horse closer, her voice low. "Are we going in there?" "Not yet," Locke replied. "We'll regroup at the old garrison outpost first. Refill our gas, sharpen our blades. If we move now, we're surrounded before we even reach the main street." Petra nodded and turned to the others. "You heard him. Move out." The squad followed Locke's lead, crossing the narrow bridge that connected to the outer wall. The faint stench of Titan steam clung to the air. Emer's face was pale, her eyes darting to every shadow. Locke glanced back briefly, meeting her gaze. "You'll be fine," he said quietly, more statement than comfort. "Stay close to Petra. Don't fall behind." Emer quickly looked away, her heart pounding. Every time his eyes met hers, she felt stripped bare, as if he could see through her very bones. Who exactly is this man? He was young, younger than her, even, but he moved and spoke like someone who had seen countless deaths. There was something unnatural about his composure, as if he carried knowledge the rest of them didn't. Petra noticed Emer's troubled look and smiled faintly. "Locke's different. Stronger than anyone I've ever met," she said softly. "Even Captain Levi sees potential in him. One day, he'll surpass everyone. You'll see." "The strongest soldier alive?" Emer repeated under her breath, half in disbelief. Petra's eyes shone with quiet conviction. "During our first mission beyond the walls, he took down nearly 20 Titans by himself. He never hesitates. Never freezes. That's why we trust him with our lives." Emer felt her stomach twist. The more she learned, the more uneasy she became. Someone like Locke, calm in the face of death, smiling through Titan blood, was far more terrifying than any monster she had ever seen. No, she thought. Better not to get close to him. But curiosity, like a seed, had already taken root. Hours later, the squad reached the abandoned garrison outpost at the edge of the inner gate. The old supply crates were mostly intact. Locke directed ELD and Gunther to refill the gas tanks while Petra checked the remaining rations. The setting sun bled orange light through the cracks in the walls. For a brief moment, the world seemed still. Locke stood on the rooftop, staring out at the city. Steam rose faintly from where the Titans had fallen earlier. His mind was distant, running calculations, mapping potential routes, predicting where reinforcements might arrive. Every second of quiet was a borrowed one. He knew that beyond the next wall, the true enemy was already watching. Chapter 83. Locke followed the direction Gunther Schultz was pointing. At the southernmost edge of the Shiganshina district, near the massive hole kicked open by the colossal Titan, several Titans wandering the streets suddenly began rushing toward the breach as if drawn by some unseen force. The Titans' behavior, it must be because they saw humans. ELD Jin concluded sharply. Everyone immediately agreed. Before Locke could even process the situation, 3 figures burst through the hole into the district. With Titans swarming toward them, the newcomers launched their ODM gear and soared up the city wall, narrowly escaping the horde below. "That's..." Gunther exclaimed in disbelief. Squad leader Mike Zacharias and his team. ELD and the others recognized them as well, excitement lighting up their weary faces. Every member of the Survey Corps knew of Mike Zacharias' squad, the elite team stationed deep in the forest of giant trees. They had been left isolated and surrounded by Titans when the royal government forbade any resupply expeditions after the fall of Wall Maria. To the core, Mike's team were heroes, men and women who had been openly abandoned yet refused to yield. Everyone had assumed they were long dead. To see them alive now, standing atop the wall, felt almost unreal. "You must be devastated," Locke thought as he watched them from afar. After struggling so hard to make it back, only to see the world in ruins. A quiet respect stirred within him. Still, something didn't add up. By Locke's calculations, the supplies left in their outpost should have lasted at least 4 months. Without new orders, there was no reason for Mike's team to have returned so early, and certainly not in such a state. His instincts told him the base in the forest of giant trees was gone. "Locke, should we go pick them up?" ELD asked urgently. That pulled Locke back to the moment. He looked toward Mike and his 2 surviving soldiers, standing exhausted and bloodstained atop the distant wall, Titans raging below them, and shook his head slightly. "Fire a signal flare," he ordered calmly. "Let them come to us from the city wall. Rushing to them now would be suicide." With so many Titans between them and Mike's squad, the risk was too great. Locke's plan was safer: draw them over from above, avoiding confrontation. Realizing the logic, ELD and the others nodded and fired the flare. The crimson smoke arced across the gray sky. Spotting it, Mike and his soldiers immediately understood. Instead of descending, they turned and began moving along the wall toward Locke's position. Because their horses were still below and the ODM gear tanks were nearly empty, they had no choice but to continue on foot. It took over 3 grueling hours before they finally reunited. "Captain Mike, why are you back?" ELD blurted out as the exhausted squad approached. Locke sighed. Couldn't he see how exhausted they were? He signaled for Petra, Rawl, and Emer to fetch food and water. Without hesitation, Petra handed them bread and canteens. Emer, unusually quiet, followed her lead. Ever since joining the team, she had shown no trace of her former sharp tongue, always doing exactly as Locke instructed. To her, Locke was terrifyingly capable, a man both respected and feared. Gulp, gulp, gulp. Mike and his men devoured the water and food desperately, too starved to care about appearances. "Slow down," Locke warned gently. "You'll hurt your stomach if you eat too fast." As if to prove him right, the 3 began coughing violently, pounding their chests until they finally caught their breath. It'd be embarrassing to survive the Titans only to choke to death on bread, Locke thought dryly, but kept it to himself. The others, sensing his silence, simply waited for Mike's team to recover. After several minutes, Mike exhaled heavily, color returning to his face. He looked at Locke with heartfelt gratitude. "Locke, thank you. If we hadn't run into you, we might have starved to death before the Titans got us." His 2 soldiers nodded weakly in agreement. Seeing their ragged condition, Locke frowned. "Your base. It's gone, isn't it?" For a long moment, Mike said nothing. His expression darkened, eyes distant, haunted. Then he nodded slowly. "It was destroyed, by a Titan unlike any I've ever seen." Locke's brow furrowed. "A new type of Titan?" His thoughts immediately went to the armored Titan, the colossal Titan, and then, the female Titan. Mike's next words confirmed his fear. "It was a woman, a towering female Titan," he said grimly, his voice trembling with restrained anger. "Her scent was unlike anything I've ever encountered." His sharp nose twitched instinctively as he spoke, the same uncanny sense of smell that had earned him his reputation. "Our lookout platform was built 45 meters high on a giant tree. It should have been safe, but she climbed up as if gravity didn't exist." "You didn't fight back?" Aluobozado asked, stunned. "Of course we fought back," Mike snapped, recalling the scene with lingering dread. "But she had some kind of crystalline armor around her neck. Our blades couldn't cut through it." "Crystallization," ELD murmured, his expression hardening. "No wonder our blades were useless." Mike took a deep, shaky breath and went on. "Even worse. I swear that Titan was self-aware. She wasn't acting on instinct, she was thinking." Silence fell. Everyone froze, their minds caught between disbelief and horror. Locke's gaze darkened, the pieces fitting together all too perfectly. The female Titan, intelligent, powerful, and now confirmed to be real. The war for humanity had just taken another step into a nightmare. Chapter 84. "Captain, you're joking, right? How could a Titan be conscious?" Aluo's voice broke the uneasy quiet. Shock and disbelief rippled through his expression, but behind his words was something darker, fear. If Titans could think, if even one of them was self-aware. He couldn't bring himself to imagine it. "I know what I sensed," Captain Mike Zacharias said firmly. His deep voice carried the weight of certainty that silenced further argument. "That scent wasn't like the others. It's different, sharper, heavier, alive in a way the rest aren't. That Titan was conscious." He lifted his head slightly, sniffing the air as the wind shifted. The motion was instinctive, almost animal. For someone who was often mocked for relying on his nose, Mike's accuracy was terrifyingly reliable. The others, Gunther, ELD, and Aluo, stiffened. The thought hit them like a thunderclap, numbing their senses. Only Locke remained calm. Captain Mike, your intuition aligns with something I've suspected for a while. Locke's tone was measured, analytical. I discussed this with Commander Irwin and Captain Levi before. Based on what we've observed, it's highly probable that there are Titans who retain human awareness, something between mindless and abnormal Titans. Everyone turned toward him, their eyes wide. Even Emer, standing near Petra, froze mid-breath. Locke's gaze flickered briefly to her. She was trying to appear composed, but her eyes betrayed her, wondering, restless, too knowing. He continued evenly, from our gathered intelligence, there's evidence suggesting a third classification of Titans, intelligent ones. The colossal Titan that breached Wall Maria, the armored Titan seen beside it, and the female Titan mentioned in earlier reports all fit that pattern. The colossal and the armored. Mike muttered, his jaw tightening. Damn them. The squad fell silent. The logic was undeniable, and terrifying. These weren't random abominations, they were enemies who could plan, think, and kill with intent. ELD broke the silence first. If they can strategize like humans, it means they're not mindless at all. Which means someone's behind all this, Petra finished quietly. Locke nodded. Exactly. But speculation won't help us now. Captain Mike, what's your decision? Will you return to headquarters, or join us in completing the current reconnaissance? Mike crossed his arms, his sharp eyes scanning the horizon. We'll go with you. We haven't been inside the walls since the fall, and I'd rather bring back useful information than excuses. Locke smirked faintly. Understood. Mike's decision wasn't just courage, it was necessity. Returning to headquarters empty-handed after losing the outer districts would only invite suspicion and punishment from the higher-ups. Going forward with Locke's team was both duty and redemption. What none of Mike's men knew, however, was that the royal government had already decided to abandon all soldiers outside the inner walls. Locke kept that truth to himself. That explanation, grim as it was, would come from Commander Irwin later. That night, they camped atop the outer wall overlooking Shiganshina. Below, the once thriving district lay in ruin, bathed in cold moonlight. The jagged silhouettes of collapsed homes stretched like broken teeth across the horizon. They didn't dare descend into the streets. The risk of alerting wandering Titans was too high. From their elevated position, they had an unobstructed view of the entire area, a clear vantage point for reconnaissance. Gunther and ELD set up recording instruments, sketching rough maps of Titan movement and district damage. Mike and his men helped gather intelligence, occasionally glancing toward the ruins in silence. The reports they compiled painted a bleak picture. Wall Maria was completely overrun. Nearly one-third of humanity was dead. Those who survived had been forced to flee inward, crowding the already strained regions of Wall Rose. Hunger, riots, and disease were spreading. The kingdom was fracturing. The fall of Wall Maria wasn't just a military failure, it was the collapse of humanity's fragile illusion of safety. Locke stood at the wall's edge, Petra beside him, Emer lingering behind. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes flicked from the distant gate to the remnants of Grisha Yeager's home, partially visible through the ruins. He remembered what Irwin had told him about a hidden injector buried there, containing Titan spinal fluid. It was one of the few that hadn't been confiscated after the fall. For a moment, he considered retrieving it. But the thought passed quickly. Too far. Too dangerous. Too unnecessary. He didn't need to risk it, not now. He already had an understanding with Grisha Yeager. The power of the Titans was something he could access if needed, but not something he wanted to rely on. Something on your mind? Petra asked quietly. Locke glanced at her. Just thinking how much this place has changed. Once, this was humanity's doorstep to the outside world. And now it's a grave, she finished softly. He didn't argue. 2 days passed in grim routine. Patrols. Observations. Mapping Titan patterns. The mission was nearly complete. For once, no Titans had approached the wall, almost unnervingly peaceful. When they finally compiled the full report, Mike's team looked visibly relieved. The tension in the air eased, and preparations began for their return to Tros to regroup with the rest of the Survey Corps. ELD secured the last satchel of notes and turned toward the wall's descent ladder. "We can head back before sundown if we move now." Locke nodded. "Good. Keep formation tight. We don't want any surprises." "Everyone, stop!" Mike's voice cut through the wind. He raised a hand sharply, his head tilting slightly as he faced the breeze. His nose twitched, once, twice, and then his expression shifted. Every muscle in his body went rigid. "No," he muttered. "No mistake. That scent, it's her." He turned to Locke, his face grim. "It's the female Titan. I can smell her." Before anyone could react, the sound of cracking stone echoed down the length of the wall. Two crystalline Titans, smaller, agile forms, emerged from the far edge, followed by a massive, unmistakably feminine figure. The female Titan's silhouette gleamed in the sunlight, steam rising from her skin as she vaulted over the shattered parapet. Locke didn't hesitate. His blades flashed free from their scabbards, twin arcs of cold steel catching the light. "Everyone, prepare for battle," he roared. The wind howled. The world blurred into motion. And once again, humanity's strongest met the storm head-on. Chapter 85, next. Holding two ultra-hard steel blades in hand and standing against the wind, Locke stared at the female Titan on the distant city wall with murderous intent. This was his first time facing a Titan shifter, an intelligent Titan. Compared with pure Titans, their combat power was on another level entirely. Even Captain Levi himself wouldn't claim guaranteed victory against one, which only underscored how dangerous this enemy was. The female Titan possessed exceptional agility and the terrifying ability to emit a shriek that could attract nearby Titans. To make matters worse, their position on the city wall offered limited space for maneuvering, leaving their three-dimensional maneuver gear far less effective than usual. After Locke's command rang out, the team immediately shifted into combat readiness. All traces of calm or conversation vanished, replaced by focused determination. "Either it dies, or we do. Emer, get back." Petra Rahl ordered, giving Emer a reassuring look. Emer hesitated for a heartbeat, her chest tightening. She had resolved that if Petra were ever in danger, she would act, no matter the risk of exposing her Titan power. Over the past few days, Petra's warmth and care had reminded Emer of something she hadn't felt in years: family. Once a beggar and outcast, she now found herself wanting to protect someone for the first time. Without retreating too far, Emer backed up about 10 meters, gripping the knife Petra had given her for self-defense. Her gaze fixed on the approaching Titan, and a strange thought took root: the urge to kill Titans, even if they were her own kind. Meanwhile, Locke's squad repositioned themselves for the female Titan's advance. "Shouldn't we take the initiative?" asked Captain Mike Zacharias, standing beside Locke. Though senior in rank and one of the Survey Corps' most skilled soldiers, Mike had observed Locke's leadership and calm under pressure. For now, he was willing to defer command, a gesture of respect and trust. "No," Locke replied firmly. "As you said, she's conscious and intelligent. If we charge recklessly, she'll crush us." ELD Jin, Gunther Schultz, Petra, and Aluo Bozado draw her attention. "Captain Mike and I will flank her and strike when the chance comes." "Understood." The four soldiers immediately prepared to move. The two newer members who had come back with Mike held their position, reading the situation but wisely keeping out of the way. One sharp look from Mike was all it took to silence any impulse to interfere. The distance between the female Titan and the squad quickly shrank to 100 meters. After exchanging a silent nod, Locke and Mike split left and right, firing their ODM cables and racing along the outer edge of the wall for a pincer attack. Locke analyzed every movement with precision. "Annie's power at this point should be weaker than later. If we combine our strength, our odds aren't bad." He drew closer, heart steady but alert. He didn't care who she had been. Now, she was simply an enemy standing between humanity and survival. But just as Locke was about to strike, the female Titan's blue eyes shifted. She turned toward Petra and the others below, then caught sight of Locke and Mike flanking her. Her gaze lingered on Mike for a brief moment. Then, to everyone's shock, she stopped moving forward. With a sharp pivot, she descended from the wall, leaping away toward Wall Maria. Using her hardened crystal ability, she vanished beyond the outer perimeter within moments. She ran? Gunther muttered. Locke lowered his blades slightly, watching the steam dissipate where the Titan had been. She escaped, he said calmly, though a subtle relief softened his tone. Truth be told, unless he was at least 80% confident in victory, Locke would rather avoid engaging a Titan shifter head-on. His chances against her right now were nowhere near that. Fortunately for them, Annie Leonhardt had doubts of her own, and chose to retreat. As silence returned, Locke turned toward Mike, who seemed equally relieved. "When you fought her before," Locke asked, "was there anything unusual?" Mike exhaled and nodded. "Nothing special, except that I couldn't cut through the nape. Once I realized that, I focused on crippling her legs to buy time for escape. It worked well enough for my team to survive." Locke understood exactly how desperate that must have been. "That was a smart decision," Locke said sincerely. Mike's expression softened, a trace of melancholy in his eyes. "Don't call it smart. It was just fear. Looking back, maybe I should have stayed and fought. Dying in battle would have been better than running." Locke shook his head. "You made the only choice that kept you alive, and that matters. I'm sure Commander Irwin would agree." Mike looked at him for a moment, then nodded. "Thank you, Locke." Locke smiled faintly. "No need for thanks. The female Titan's gone, and we've done enough for now. Let's regroup and report to the commander. He'll be glad to see you back." Every soldier with Mike's strength and experience was invaluable to humanity. Commander Irwin Smith would no doubt recognize that. Chapter 86. The journey back to base was far from peaceful. Titans appeared frequently along the route, but with the addition of the formidable Mike Sicarius, the danger was greatly reduced. His keen sense of smell and unmatched combat intuition allowed him to detect Titans long before they came into sight, an ability that left even Locke in quiet admiration. Out of curiosity, Locke tried to mimic Mike's method, inhaling deeply as if he could sense something in the shifting wind. Though he managed to sharpen his perception slightly, the difference between them was vast. Eventually, he gave up, realizing that not every skill could be imitated. Instead, his mind turned toward strategy, the part of war he could control. By the time their group reached the Tros district and rejoined other returning teams, the sun was already dipping low. Their next destination was the Survey Corps' temporary headquarters in the Alemiha district. Inside the commander's office. "It's good that you made it back," Irwin Smith said, rising from behind his desk as Mike entered the room. Just as Locke had predicted, Irwin's expression softened with relief the moment he saw Mike alive. The fall of the forward base had been a heavy blow, and though no one spoke of it openly, the guilt and loss hung in the air. Now, with Wall Maria still lost and the Corps in constant retreat, every surviving veteran was a lifeline. The royal government's power had been shaken to its core. In this unstable period, the Survey Corps, bloody but unbroken, had become humanity's last shield. And among them, Mike Sicarius, second only to Captain Levi, was an indispensable asset. Feeling Irwin's sincerity, Mike's shoulders eased for the first time in days. He opened his mouth as if to say something long and thoughtful, but after a pause, he simply said, "Thank you." Irwin gave a firm nod and placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "It's embarrassing to say this right after your return, but there's no time to rest. The Corps is stretched thin, and your strength is needed." Mike straightened, his expression solemn. "It's my duty. For humanity's freedom." Irwin nodded, his gaze shifting toward Locke. "And you, thank you for your hard work." Locke stepped forward and handed over a neatly folded mission report. "The information on the southern sector of Wall Maria and the Shiganshina district is all included. The situation is worse than we anticipated. Every day that passes makes recovery less likely." Irwin unfolded the report but did not look down at it immediately. Instead, He gave Locke a brief nod, inviting him to continue. The number of Titans in Wall Maria grows with each passing day, Locke said calmly. If the royal government truly intends to retake it, they must act this year. By next year, it might be too late. He wasn't exaggerating. Since the days of King Karl Fritz, who withdrew humanity within the walls and erased their memories, the island had been a dumping ground for countless pure Titans sent from beyond the sea. Nearly a century later, their numbers had become insurmountable. Even with the best equipment and training, humanity couldn't hope to eradicate them all. The military police were ill-suited for combat, the garrison struggled to maintain morale. Only the Survey Corps had the strength and will to fight beyond the walls. But even among them, casualties were endless. Locke's strategy was clear: total extermination was not the goal. The true key was the founding Titan. If the Rice family could be persuaded, or forced, to use its power, the tide could shift. But the royal ideology was too deeply rooted in passivity and fear. Waiting any longer meant dooming humanity to extinction. Erwin took a slow breath, his expression unreadable. Given the current state of the government, launching an operation this year is impossible, he said, his voice steady despite the disappointment in his eyes. For now, we'll consolidate our forces and prepare for the opportunity. He placed the report aside and turned back toward Locke. Did you encounter anything else out there? Locke nodded. Yes. During our mission in Shiganshina, we came across another intelligent Titan. Due to her appearance, we're calling her the female Titan for now. She didn't attack. Instead, she retreated toward Wall Maria. She likely intends to infiltrate Wall Rose. Erwin's gaze sharpened. The female Titan. Including the armored Titan and the colossal Titan, that makes 3 confirmed intelligent Titans. And possibly more. The room grew silent. Even Mike's usual composure hardened into grim understanding. Erwin stepped toward the window, staring at the overcast sky. If Titans truly are transformed humans, he said quietly, then they're already among us. Their infiltration isn't just possible, it's inevitable. The question is, what do they want? Locke met his gaze firmly. We don't know yet. But there's something else, our most important discovery. Erwin turned back. Go on. Locke's tone grew serious. A girl. She's not an ordinary civilian. There's something about her, something we can't overlook. I suggest we secure her before anyone else does. Erwin's eyes narrowed. A girl, you say? His mind was already racing ahead. Understood. Prepare for immediate action. Every piece of information counts. Mike gave a curt nod of agreement. The stakes were rising fast, and none of them needed reminding. Every decision now would ripple through humanity's future. Outside, the wind howled faintly beyond the stone walls, a constant reminder of the world waiting to devour them. But within the Survey Corps, resolve was hardening once again. Whatever lay ahead, they would face it head-on. Humanity's future would not be decided by fate, it would be seized by its own hands. Chapter 87. The journey back was filled with danger, but with Captain Hang Zoe leading the way, the threat of confrontation was greatly reduced. Her keen instincts and years of battle experience allowed her to sense Titans long before they appeared, judging their direction and number from faint traces carried on the wind. Locke couldn't help but imitate her, sniffing the air curiously as they rode. For all his effort, he managed only a small improvement in awareness, but the gulf between him and Hang was vast. With a sigh, he gave up and focused instead on strategy, turning his thoughts toward what lay ahead. By the time their unit regrouped with other returning teams in the Tros district, the sun was already dipping low. From there, they rode onto the Survey Corps' temporary headquarters in the Stohis district. In Commander Erwin's office. It's good that you returned safely, Erwin Smith said, rising from behind his desk as Hang entered. Just as Locke expected, Erwin's expression softened with visible relief. The fall of their forward base was not mentioned, there was no blame, only quiet understanding. The Corps had endured enough loss already. With Wall Maria gone, Their priority now was maintaining stability within the walls and planning humanity's eventual counterattack. The royal government, shaken and desperate, had begun to take a sudden interest in the Survey Corps' operations. Hang's return brought much-needed hope. Her intellect, her field experience, and her combat skill, second only to Captain Levi, made her indispensable. Feeling Erwin's sincerity, Hang finally relaxed. The exhaustion in her eyes softened as she gave a simple, "Thank you." Erwin nodded and placed a steady hand on her shoulder. "There's no time to rest. We're stretched thin, and I'll need your help on several matters." "It's my duty," Hang replied crisply, saluting with resolve. "For the freedom of mankind." "Let's work together, then," Erwin said before turning to Locke. "And you, thank you for your hard work." Locke stepped forward and handed over a folded mission report. "Everything concerning the southern sector of Wal Maria and Shiganshina district is documented here. The situation is worse than expected. The longer we wait, the harder it will be to reclaim the land." Erwin gestured for him to continue. "The number of Titans inside Wal Maria increases daily. If the government intends to retake it, it must be done this year. By next year, our chances will be nearly gone." Locke's words were calm but heavy with truth. Since King Karl Fritz withdrew humanity behind the walls, Marley had sent countless pure Titans to the island over the decades. Nearly a century later, the number was staggering. Humanity's weapons and manpower were far too limited to wipe them out. The Survey Corps remained the only branch capable of fighting Titans directly. The garrison and military police were unreliable in the field, most soldiers could barely stand their ground, much less face a Titan head-on. Locke's thinking was different. Exterminating every Titan was not necessary. What humanity needed was control over the founding Titan. If the Rice family could be persuaded, or forced, to use that power, Titans could shift from being monsters to weapons of defense. But the royal family's isolationist doctrine ran too deep. There was no choice left but to seize their fate through force. "It's impossible to launch any operation this year," Erwin said, disappointment flickering across his face. The royal government was still paralyzed by fear and internal conflict. After a pause, he continued, "Any other discoveries?" Locke nodded. "Yes. We encountered another intelligent Titan. For now, we're calling her the female Titan. She didn't engage in combat, she withdrew toward Wal Maria, likely preparing to infiltrate Walrose." Erwin's expression grew stern. "Including the armored Titan and the colossal Titan, that makes 3 confirmed intelligent Titans. And there may be more." The weight of his words hung heavy in the air. Hang glanced at Locke, frowning in curiosity, but said nothing. "Assuming Titans truly are transformed humans," Erwin said quietly, staring out the window at the gray sky, "then infiltration isn't just likely, it's already begun. Their purpose, however, remains unclear." Locke nodded. "There's one more thing, the most significant discovery of this expedition." Erwin turned to him. "Go on." Locke's tone deepened. "A girl. She's different. She's not an ordinary civilian. I believe she's key to understanding more about the Titans. She's here at the base." Erwin's eyes narrowed. "Are you certain she isn't one of them in disguise?" "Absolutely," Locke replied firmly. After a long silence, Erwin finally said, "Then you'll be responsible for her. Can I trust you to keep her under control?" Locke nodded once. "You can. But if we want her to trust us, Petra's help will be crucial. Emer listens to her." A small smile crossed Erwin's face. "Then I'll leave it in your hands." Locke chuckled softly. "I'll do my best. Though Petra may not even realize how much Emer depends on her." He thought briefly about Emer, technically over 70 years old, though still youthful in body after decades trapped as a pure Titan. The thought of that existence, mindless, wandering, and eternal, sent a chill through him. Erwin's brow furrowed slightly. "Are you certain about this approach?" Locke nodded. "Trust can't be forced. It's better to let things unfold naturally. Emer will choose the right path soon enough. Erwin studied him for a moment, then smiled faintly. If I didn't know your history, I'd think you were far older than you look. Locke laughed softly. Age has never been my strong point. Erwin brushed Locke's hair aside, an almost fatherly gesture. The future belongs to your generation, Locke. I have high hopes for you. Don't let me down. My resolve hasn't changed, Locke said simply. What a rare thing, to still hold on to that, Erwin murmured, a trace of admiration in his tone. After they exchanged a few final words, Locke excused himself from the office. Outside, the sun had begun to sink behind the rooftops. As Locke passed through the quiet streets near the garrison barracks, laughter and familiar voices reached his ears. Inside the Jaeger home, Aaron stood in the middle of the room holding 3 wooden sticks, 2 in his hands and 1 clamped awkwardly in his teeth, waving them around in mock battle. Armin looked embarrassed, while Mikasa observed with her usual calm, though a faint crease in her brow betrayed her disapproval. Locke stepped inside. All 3 turned to him instantly. Locke, you're back! Aaron shouted, dropping the stick from his mouth and running forward. Armin and Mikasa followed quickly, smiles lighting their faces. I'm back, Locke replied with a faint smile, resting a hand on Aaron's head. He couldn't help glancing at the scene he'd just interrupted. Aaron, what exactly were you doing just now? Training, Aaron said proudly. Armin blushed, while Mikasa looked away, pretending not to be involved. Locke sighed. 2 swords are enough. There's no need to bite one between your teeth. Aaron frowned. But I saw you train like that back in Shiganshina once. I thought that's how you did it. Locke froze, then noticed Armin's and Mikasa's awkward expressions. He quickly changed the subject. Are Carla and your mother home? They went out, but Dad's here, Aaron said. Just then, Grisha Jaeger stepped out from the living room, smiling warmly. Locke, you're back. Perfect timing, I need to speak with you. Come with me. Aaron, you and the others stay here. What? Dad, that's not fair. Aaron protested. Locke just got back. Grisha chuckled. You'll have plenty of time with him later. Without waiting for more objections, he motioned for Locke to follow him out. See you later, Locke said over his shoulder before catching up. The evening wind carried faint laughter from behind him, a brief moment of peace before the storm yet to come. Chapter 88. No, she should have left the Shiganshina district, Locke said truthfully. Seeing the disappointment on Grisha's face, Locke couldn't help but offer a few comforting words. At least now she's probably still alive. That's something worth holding on to. Promise me, Grisha said earnestly, his eyes sharp and desperate. If you ever meet her again in the wild, don't kill her. Locke nodded. I promise you. Keeping Dina Fritz alive, and finding a way to restore her human form, was a crucial part of their plan. Thinking of that, Locke asked quietly, how are things going on your end? I've become fairly well known on the mainland, Grisha said, rubbing the bridge of his nose tiredly. Recently, many powerful people, including members of the royal government, have come to me for treatment. But I still can't make contact with the Rice family. Don't worry, Locke said gently. We still have time. Grisha's eyes grew anxious. No. I don't have time. Locke fell silent. Half an hour later, after finalizing the rough direction of their next steps, Locke stepped out of the room and closed the door quietly behind him. The air felt heavy. He let out a long sigh. Perhaps this was the greatest sorrow of being a Titan shifter, the 13-year curse. No matter how strong or brilliant one was, time was merciless. Just as Grisha said, there wasn't much time left for him. The father's will would soon pass to the son. From the moment Aaron was born, his fate had already been sealed. Aaron was the best candidate to inherit the attack Titan. Locke walked out with a complicated expression, and as soon as he stepped into the yard, Aaron and the others surrounded him. Locke, Aaron asked anxiously, what's the situation in the Shiganshina district? He was deeply concerned about his hometown. Not only Aaron, but Armin and Mikasa also looked at Locke with tense, expectant eyes. But the truth was always cruel. When they learned that the Shiganshina district had become a Titan breeding ground, their faces fell. Their spirits, so full of determination moments ago, dimmed with despair. Eren, who had always burned with hatred for the Titans, clenched his fists tighter. His determination to join the Survey Corps and fight back only grew stronger. Even Mikasa, normally so calm and resistant to the idea, didn't try to stop him this time. A faint, unreadable emotion flickered in her usually steady gaze. Locke understood her. Beneath Mikasa's quiet exterior was a fiercely protective heart. She cherished those around her deeply. Later that evening, Carla and Martha returned home, followed by Keith, who came late from his shift at the arsenal, a post Locke had personally recommended him for. For the first time in a long while, the family sat together for dinner. They spoke about the chaos outside, shared memories of better days, and sighed with a quiet, mutual understanding. They were fortunate. Grisha was a respected doctor, and Locke had influence within the Survey Corps. Together, they had stability and protection. But for ordinary citizens without power or connections, life within the walls had become unbearable. With limited farmland and dwindling food stores, jobs were scarce. The royal government's apathy only made matters worse. Society inside the walls, especially near Wall Rose, was restless and near collapse. The garrison corps alone could no longer maintain order. Even the Survey Corps had been forced to assist in suppressing riots, their blades and ODM gear pointed at civilians instead of Titans. It was a bitter irony. And though Locke knew this instability could lead to catastrophe, he was powerless to intervene, for now. The timing wasn't right, and his influence alone wasn't enough to sway the government. The next morning, after a brief night's rest, Locke left early. He had other responsibilities to manage, particularly his connection with Ymir. He arrived at the garrison's training yard without issue and found Petra and Ymir already there, practicing. "Locke, you're back," Petra called out with her usual bright smile. "I'm back," he replied with a nod, returning her warmth. "What are you two doing?" "Training," Petra answered seriously. "We women aren't as strong as you men, so we have to work harder. I don't want to be a burden on missions." "And her?" Locke asked, glancing at Ymir, who avoided his eyes. "Of course Ymir's training too," Petra said gently. "She's too thin for her own good." Ymir tried to hide a small smile. It was clear she enjoyed Petra's company. Locke gave a faint grin and shrugged. "Well, I could use some early training myself. Let's do it together." "All right," Petra agreed readily. Ymir opened her mouth to refuse but bit back the words, clenching her jaw instead. She had always been wary of Locke, afraid of him, even, but Locke had noticed long ago and never minded. After stretching, Locke began his morning exercises. The training ground was quiet, with only the three of them present. At first, Petra and Ymir managed to keep up with him. But before long, they were both left far behind, breathless and wide-eyed as Locke continued his relentless pace with unwavering energy. "Are you trying to discourage us?" Petra gasped, half joking, half defeated. "I'm never training with Locke again." Despite her exasperation, Locke couldn't help but admire her resilience. Petra was no ordinary soldier, an elite member of the Survey Corps, skilled enough to slay Titans on her own. She wasn't tall or heavily built, but she was capable, agile, and sharp. Still, compared to Locke, the difference was stark. It was a vivid reminder of what separated genius from mortal effort. Meanwhile, Ymir muttered something under her breath, something that sounded like pervert, and looked away, ignoring Locke completely. She just wanted to stay close to Petra, to feel the rare warmth of companionship she'd long been denied. If only I could always be with Petra. Ymir thought, lowering her gaze. Somewhere peaceful, somewhere without Titans. Her chest tightened at the thought of Petra returning to the battlefield. The fight against Titans was deadly, unforgiving. Losing Petra, after finally finding someone who felt like family, was a thought Ymir couldn't bear. But then came the inevitable sting of guilt. Her secret weighed heavily. If she knew I was a Titan, Emer thought bitterly, would she still treat me this way? Petra noticed Emer's lingering stare and raised a brow. Is there something on my face? Emer shook her head and smiled faintly. No. I just think you're really kind. Chapter 89, Inside the Survey Corps Equipment Workshop. Clang! 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 The sound of a hammer on steel rang endlessly through the vast chamber, mingling with the hiss of steam and the sharp scent of oil. Sparks burst like fireflies each time metal met metal, while the occasional snap of an overstrained spring punctuated the rhythm. Among those present were Commander Erwin Smith, Captain Levi Ackerman, and Section Commander Hang Zoe. Nearly every senior officer was in attendance, along with 2 officials from the Royal Government's Logistics Department, men whose finely pressed uniforms stood in stark contrast to the soot-stained workshop. Erwin's calm voice cut through the noise. You must have noticed, the upgraded equipment performs significantly better in all aspects. I believe it deserves immediate deployment across the Corps. The 2 officials remained stiff and expressionless, their eyes darting nervously as though hoping the conversation would pass over them. Erwin continued, tone unshaken. You both understand the stakes. The Titans beyond the walls remain an active threat. At any time, they could breach our defenses. Equipment upgrades are no longer a matter of convenience, they are a matter of survival. A shadow of fear passed over the officials' faces. Having lived comfortably within Wall Sina their entire lives, the word Titan was little more than a distant terror to them. But the reality was different. Refugees continued flooding inward, and the strain on resources had become unbearable. If Walrose fell again, the result would be apocalyptic. Locke, standing at the edge of the assembly, watched their feigned composure with thinly veiled contempt. Without a word, he turned and strode out of the workshop. Even now, they think only of their profits. Corruption runs deeper than any wall. The cold air outside greeted him. He exhaled slowly, frustration visible in every line of his face. From behind, Hank's familiar voice drifted toward him, light-hearted but carrying a note of genuine concern. Locke, disgusted already? Wouldn't you be? He replied sharply. Hang let out a soft sigh, her usual eccentric energy subdued. We've seen it too many times. It's like breathing in the same poison every day. After a while, you stop coughing. We're soldiers, Locke. Even if we see what's wrong, there's only so much we can do. No, Locke said firmly, his tone unwavering. We can do something. Hang studied him for a moment, the hint of a smile tugging at her lips, part admiration, part worry. Don't do anything reckless. Someone has to take the first step, Locke countered, meeting her gaze. Her brow softened. Even so, Locke, you're only 14. Age means nothing, he said simply, with the quiet confidence of someone who had already seen too much. Hang gave a faint laugh and turned toward the door. Let's go back before those bureaucrats accuse us of plotting mutiny. If it weren't for you, I wouldn't have stepped outside at all, she added, though her tone was gentle, not scolding. As they walked back, Hang glanced sideways at him. Despite his youth, Locke carried a sense of calm and certainty that steadied even her. Age means nothing, she thought with a small smile. But if you really want to lead one day, you've still got a long road ahead. Still, something in her heart whispered that he might just make it. By the end of the meeting, Erwin had skillfully navigated the political undercurrents. The proposal to upgrade the Survey Corps' equipment met minimal resistance. Even the royal bureaucrats understood that soldiers fighting Titans needed every possible advantage. But for Locke, it wasn't enough. Sharper blades and sturdier harnesses alone wouldn't change the odds. True progress required innovation, refined maneuver gear, stronger cables, lighter tanks, better gas efficiency. Every small improvement could mean the difference between life and death. Knowing this, Locke sought out Hang later that day in her research chamber. The lab was dim, cluttered with blueprints, mechanical parts, and open notebooks filled with scrawled equations. The smell of oil and burnt powder hung heavy in the air. Hang, hunched over a half-assembled gear prototype, didn't even look up as she spoke. Modifying the ODM gear for greater efficiency is possible, she said, voice-weary. But not on a large scale, not yet. Mass production would be impossible without substantial funding. And after they've already approved the blade upgrades, there's no chance the Royal Treasury will approve another request. She rubbed her eyes. They'll argue that the garrison and military police need the resources more. Locke nodded slightly. I know. The government's too focused on feeding refugees to think long-term. Exactly, Hang muttered. The system's collapsing under its own weight. Food shortages, overcrowding, unstable districts. It's like watching a candle burn at both ends. Locke was quiet for a moment, then said with a faint, knowing smile, that's exactly where our opportunity lies. Hang raised an eyebrow. What are you thinking, Locke? Tell me, he said, leaning against the work table, what food has the highest nutritional yield per acre? Something filling, cheap, and easy to grow. Hang blinked at the unexpected question. After a moment's thought, she said, potatoes? Exactly. Locke's smile widened. Hang threw her hands up. And what does that have to do with maneuver gear? Simple, Locke said. If we push for widespread potato cultivation, we solve two problems at once, the food crisis and funding. The surplus from agricultural development can be redirected into weapon research. Less money spent on food relief means more for innovation. Hang stared at him, mouth slightly open. You're serious? Completely, Locke said without hesitation. It's a sustainable plan, and one that won't raise suspicion. Hang crossed her arms, thinking. It was absurd, yet brilliant. Agriculture was neutral territory, something even the most self-serving politicians couldn't oppose. And behind that front, they could discreetly allocate resources toward technology and weaponry. Finally, she grinned. All right. We'll disguise it as an agricultural development project for the betterment of the walls. We'll attach the equipment upgrades as logistical support for farming efficiency. Exactly, Locke said with satisfaction. We'll use their bureaucracy against them. The two of them leaned over the table, drafting notes and outlines deep into the night, a fusion of science, strategy, and rebellion. Hang's pen scratched rapidly across the paper while Locke spoke quietly, his eyes burning with purpose. This wasn't just the beginning of a technological revolution. It was the start of something far greater. A revolution for survival. Chapter 91, 15 kilometers east of the Shiganshina district. Once a quiet and desolate stretch of wasteland, the area had transformed into a hive of determined activity. Refugees worked tirelessly across the fields, pulling weeds, turning soil, and planting crops beneath the pale sunlight. No one shirked their duty, no one complained. On every face lingered a fragile but genuine smile, the kind born not from comfort, but from purpose. After the catastrophe, for many who had lost everything, simply having work and a path towards self-sufficiency was already a blessing. At the center of it all, on a plot of freshly reclaimed land, Locke, Petra Rahl, Emer, and Armin Arler worked together planting rows of potatoes. Strictly speaking, it was Locke doing most of the work, his movements confident, efficient, and practiced, while the others followed his rhythm. When the project began, Locke had no knowledge of agriculture whatsoever. But after days of observation and experimentation, his natural aptitude for learning allowed him to grasp the techniques quickly. Within just 3 days, his planting skill surpassed that of even the most seasoned farmers among the refugees. Petra and Armin often stopped to watch him in disbelief, marveling at the ease with which he mastered something entirely foreign. Even Emer, who usually wore a look of indifference, found herself watching with faint surprise. Locke, however, remained focused, not on praise, but on results. Every seed buried in the soil represented a small step toward the island's survival. As the final stretch of the field was planted, a faint chime echoed in Locke's mind, an echo of progress known only to him. A clarity washed through him, unlocking new understanding. Movements that once felt forced now came naturally, as if the knowledge had always been there. When the last row was finished, Locke straightened up and exhaled, brushing dirt from his gloves. That's the last of it. Petra jogged over, smiling as she handed him a flask of water. Good work. But Locke, you don't have to do everything yourself. We're here to help you. Locke took a sip and gave a small nod. It's fine. The sooner this field's done, the sooner we can move on to the next. Armin, wiping sweat from his brow, chimed in cheerfully, You've done so much already, Locke. Honestly, if it weren't for you, my parents might still be wandering the streets. Thank you. Locke gave a modest shrug. It's everyone's effort that makes this work. One person can't rebuild an entire world. Mikasa, who had been quietly tying off bundles nearby, stepped forward. We'll help with the next one, she said simply, her voice steady but gentle. Before Locke could reply, Ymir's voice cut through, sharp and dismissive. Don't mistake me for a farmer. I'm only here because Petra asked. Locke glanced at her, amused. Then consider it exercise. Yeah, Ymir muttered, turning away. The group's laughter carried lightly over the fields as they made their way toward a small wooden cabin at the edge of the camp. It was one of many temporary structures built to house the workers, rough, but standing firm against the wind. Inside, the air was thick with the aroma of freshly cooked food. Petra set down a pot of steaming stew as everyone gathered around a crude wooden table. The king launched a new initiative, Petra began, breaking the quiet hum of eating. A plan to retake Wall Maria. Recruitment's already started. Locke looked up sharply. Recruitment? Volunteers? Partly, Petra said with a frown. They're calling it a volunteer army, but half the recruits are refugees. Many didn't have a choice, they were drafted to fill numbers. The garrison, military police, and survey corps are all involved. Operations are set to begin next spring. Armin's expression darkened. 100,000 people, and most of them untrained. Locke's voice was calm, but edged with disdain. Using civilians to fight titans. Our king truly sees the people as expendable pieces on a board. The words hung heavy in the air. Everyone knew what he meant. Even trained soldiers fell easily to titans, throwing civilians into such a fight was nothing short of slaughter. A silence settled over the table, broken only by the distant sound of wind against the wooden walls. Then, with perfect timing, the door swung open. Hey! Why didn't anyone tell me dinner was ready? Hang Zoe's voice cut through the gloom, full of mock outrage. You all left me to deal with the equipment check and farming reports alone. I'm starving. Locke gestured toward the table, amused. Sit down before you collapse. Without hesitation, Hang dropped into the empty seat and began devouring Petra's cooking, muttering between bites, You know, for someone who spends all day studying titans, I sure appreciate simple food. Petra smiled faintly. Eat as much as you like, Captain. Across from her, Ymir sat with her bowl untouched, staring out the window. Noticing this, Hang leaned forward, spoon halfway to her mouth. Ymir, you're not eating? What's wrong? Potatoes not up to your taste? Ymir glared back. Mind your own plate. That's what Petra calls you, right? Hang teased, tilting her head. My sister's different, Ymir replied coldly, her voice softening slightly only when she glanced toward Petra. Oh? Hang's grin widened mischievously. Is it because her chest is bigger than mine? Captain Hang. Petra nearly choked, her cheeks turning scarlet. Mikasa froze mid-bite. Armin stared down at his bowl, pretending to find the potatoes fascinating. Even Locke let out a sigh, pinching the bridge of his nose. You two never change. Ymir's scowl softened into something halfway between annoyance and laughter. You really are insufferable, Captain. The tension dissolved in chuckles. Outside, the last light of day faded into the horizon, painting the sky in hues of amber and gray. Locke looked around the table, at Petra's gentle smile, Armin's thoughtful eyes, Mikasa's quiet focus, Ymir's reluctant grin, and Hang's boundless energy, and for a fleeting moment, the heaviness of the world beyond the walls felt distant. For now, they were safe. For now, there was warmth. He leaned back, gazing out the small window toward the fields where new life had just been planted. Those rows of potatoes were more than food, they were symbols of defiance, of rebuilding, of hope. A tiny spark against the endless dark. Chapter 92, Time moved swiftly. In the blink of an eye, several months had passed. The first batch of potatoes had ripened, and the fields now glimmered gold under the late summer sun. Laughter and excitement filled the air as the refugees worked the harvest, hands and hearts busy with hope. Watching the scene before him, Locke felt a rare, quiet satisfaction. The reclamation effort he had spearheaded from nothing had flourished beyond expectation. The barren wasteland outside Tros now stretched with life and color, evidence of what unity and resolve could achieve. Among the refugees, his reputation had grown naturally. He had been the one who had stood beside them, worked beside them, and turned the impossible into reality. To many, Locke was no longer just a soldier of the Survey Corps, he had become their leader, their symbol of hope. Still, the results were limited to the Tros district. Even a successful harvest here could only feed those within this zone. Other regions would have to find their own footing. There was no avoiding that truth. Locke's influence, and the manpower the Survey Corps could spare, only extended so far. Meanwhile, the upper walls, where the king and nobles resided, remained firmly under the jurisdiction of the military police brigade. Those inner elites, ever protective of their comfort, resisted the Survey Corps at every turn. It was precisely for that reason that Erwin had relocated the Survey Corps' headquarters from the interior to Tros district. The move gave them more autonomy, free from constant oversight by the capital's bureaucrats. But it also distanced them from the heart of power. As with all things, there were gains and there were losses. For Locke, though, the project was complete. The reclamation plan was functioning smoothly, the food cycle was stable, and capable hands were in place to oversee operations. It was time for him to move on. "Hang, I'll leave things to you from here," Locke said, standing beside her on the ridge overlooking the golden fields. Hang gave an exaggerated sigh. "You really enjoy giving orders, don't you?" "Last I checked, my rank outranks yours." Locke smiled faintly. "You know what they say, the more capable, the heavier the workload." Hang folded her arms, trying not to smile. "Besides," Locke added, "you're more suited for this than anyone else. You prefer experiments to patrols. Here, you can study soil nutrients, crop resistance, or whatever scientific curiosity hits you next, without titans breathing down your neck." Hang tilted her head, half suspicious, half touched. "You make it sound like you're doing me a favor." "Maybe I am," he said simply. It was true. The past few months had offered rare peace for Hang, time to experiment, test, and observe rather than constantly risk her life beyond the walls. Still, her curiosity soon shifted to something else entirely. "Locke," she began, lowering her voice, "why do you care so much about Mikasa?" Locke froze. "You noticed?" "So I was right," she said, eyes narrowing mischievously. "Don't worry, no one else picked up on it. But I'm very observant. I wasn't sure at first, but your face just confirmed it." Locke sighed, half amused, half annoyed. "You're as sharp as ever." He grew quiet for a moment before adding, "I can't tell you the reason, not yet. But after I leave, keep an eye on her for me. It's important." Hang straightened, her tone softening with rare seriousness. "You can count on me." Locke exhaled, though the thought of Hang shadowing Mikasa made him pity the girl. Being watched by a science-obsessed researcher was far from ideal. After a few more words, and Locke's reluctant promise that if he ever encountered a small titan under 4 meters, he'd try to capture it alive for Hang's study, the two exchanged a brief, understanding smile. Not long after, ELD Jin and Gunther Schultz arrived with Erwin's orders in hand. Levi, occupied elsewhere, had delegated command to them. "Locke," ELD said, handing him a sealed envelope, "Commander Erwin's recommendation was approved. You're being promoted to squad leader." Locke blinked. That was fast. Apparently, the approval came straight through the chain of command, Gunther added. Even Commander Darius Sackley signed off himself. That raised eyebrows all around. The military police's commander rarely involved himself in Survey Corps promotions. Whether it was bureaucratic maneuvering or some unseen political motive, no one could say. Erwin, ever pragmatic, chose not to question it too deeply. Whatever the reason, as long as it advanced humanity's cause, he would accept it. Your promotion rate is terrifying, Hang remarked, half in jest. At this pace, you'll catch up to me before I can blink. The next step up is Levi's spot. Locke chuckled. I'll take that as encouragement. Hang smiled but didn't deny it. She'd seen Locke's potential from the start. The others congratulated him warmly. Aaron, in particular, could hardly contain his excitement, cheering loud enough to draw amused looks from everyone present. Mikasa, on the other hand, muttered under her breath, "Show off," and turned away to help Petra. The two had grown unexpectedly close in recent months, Petra's patience and warmth balancing Mikasa's quiet intensity. Even Petra had begun to find Mikasa's constant presence exhausting, but she couldn't bring herself to push her away. Locke, meanwhile, allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. He was only 14, yet already stood among the Corps' squad leaders, a position most soldiers needed years, if not decades, to reach. But he hadn't relied on luck. Every success, every mission, every calculated move had been earned. Beyond the titles and ranks, he saw something larger at play. Grisha Yeager's ongoing work in the interior was proceeding smoothly, thanks in part to the growing awareness of Locke's own name. The higher-ups now knew of him. Even Commander Sackley had taken notice. In times like these, power gravitated naturally toward those who proved their worth. And Locke intended to make sure that every step forward brought humanity closer to true freedom. Chapter 93. In the Karanis area of the eastern wall of Rose. Here, Aluo and the others finally understood just how great the results of Locke's potato project were. Without comparison, there was no harm. The refugees in Karanis could only receive a small ration of bread each day, barely enough to keep them alive. Their faces were pale and hollow, their bodies little more than skin and bone. Eyes dulled, they moved like ghosts, stripped of all vitality. If they hadn't been forced to relocate from time to time, they might have seemed no different from corpses already left behind. Each wore an armband of the volunteer regiment, marking them for conscription early next year. When the time came, they would be sent beyond the walls to reclaim lost territory from the Titans. Everyone knew what that meant. Even Aluo, whose sharp tongue rarely softened, could only stare with pity, his last shred of faith in the royal government finally shattering. Sending them outside the walls to fight Titans. What's the difference between that and murder? Locke, walking at the head of the formation, answered quietly. There is no difference. To the royal government, these people were already meant to die. Why? Aluo's voice cracked, his eyes red with anger. ELD and Gunther exchanged grim looks beside him. Locke's tone stayed calm, though his words cut coldly through the air. Because the land that's left inside the walls can't feed everyone. He wasn't indifferent. He simply saw the truth for what it was. Unless the royal government allowed him full authority, total control over manpower, resources, and every acre of fertile soil, there was no solution. The potatoes grown in Trost were the best seedlings they could cultivate under limited conditions. Even with that success, it was only enough to sustain one district. The rest of humanity had to fend for themselves. And the royal government would never grant Locke that kind of power. The success at Trost had already stretched their tolerance to its limit. Erwin must have faced immense political pressure because of it, yet he never once complained or revealed how heavy that burden was. That was reality. There was no world where everyone could live peacefully. Someone's comfort always came at someone else's cost. Understanding that, Locke never once refused an assignment. He knew exactly what Erwin was preparing for now, the confrontation with Emer. After months of tension within the walls and the Survey Corps itself, Erwin had made his decision. The decisive moment was approaching. But before that, Locke's team still had to carry out their symbolic mission beyond the wall. The air grew heavy as they approached the Karani's command post. Pushing away distraction, the squad followed Locke to deliver their orders. A familiar voice called from ahead. "Locke? You're here too? Uncle Hannes?" Locke blinked in surprise. "You were transferred here?" The man looked older, more worn than Locke remembered. Years of guilt had carved themselves into his expression. Locke smiled faintly. "That day wasn't your fault, Uncle. Don't carry that weight forever." Hannes exhaled a shaky breath. "I know, but every time I close my eyes, I see it all over again. I don't think I'll ever forget." His gaze softened as he looked at the young soldier before him. Locke, barely into his teens, stood with the calm of a veteran and the resolve of a commander. "Your father would be proud of who you've become," Hannes said quietly. "You've already surpassed him." Locke looked away. "I hope so." He took out the official document and handed it over. "We're on assignment, Uncle. Could you help us pass the message?" "Of course." Hannes checked the paper and paused when he saw the seal, Squad Leader Locke. For a moment, he stood frozen, marveling at how far Grisha's son had come. In such a short time, this boy had risen to a rank that many soldiers never reached in a lifetime. Then again, Hannes knew Locke's reputation, his skill with ODM gear, his record of Titan kills, his composure under pressure. In the Survey Corps, ability mattered more than age, and Locke's achievements left no room for doubt. After verifying the orders, Hannes led them to the top of the wall. The massive iron gates below remained shut tight. The royal decree forbade opening them, claiming it was to maintain city security. So the only way out was the vertical ladder built for ODM gear, a slow, grueling climb, but the only option left. Locke went first. Wind whipped across the wall's surface as he reached the top, scanning the horizon beyond. Endless plains stretched outward, littered with the skeletal remains of old villages and the ruins of humanity's past. Aluo and the others followed, attaching their cables to the stone ledge. Once everyone was ready, Locke gave a curt nod. "Let's move." And with that, they vanished into the wilderness. Hannes watched from below until the last shadow disappeared into the distant haze. He bowed his head and murmured a silent prayer. "Please, let them return alive." Meanwhile, far behind the wall, another scene unfolded. Erwin Smith, accompanied by Captain Levi and several elite members of the Survey Corps, advanced through the bustling farming area, the same one Locke had built from the ground up months earlier. They headed straight for a modest wooden cabin near the fields, where two figures waited inside, Petra Rahl and Emer. Around them, the workers quickly noticed the fully armed soldiers approaching. The cheerful chatter of harvest ceased. No one dared to linger. Within moments, the area emptied, leaving only the rustle of wind through the wheat and the echo of boots against the soil. Erwin stepped through the doorway first, his expression unreadable. Levi followed silently behind, his presence sharp and suffocating. Inside, Petra and Emer sat opposite each other at a wooden table. Hang Zoe stood beside them, eyes locked on Emer with clinical intensity. The instant Erwin entered, Petra and Hang both rose to attention. "Commander," they said in unison, saluting smartly. Erwin acknowledged them with a curt nod, then turned his gaze on Emer. The woman met his eyes coolly, unflinching. For a long moment, neither spoke. The air between them thickened, charged with unspoken meaning. Finally, Erwin broke the silence. "You seem to understand why we're here." Emer's lips curved faintly, more bitter than amused. "Of course I do. Ever since you pulled that pervert Locke off my back, I knew this day would come." Her voice was calm, but her eyes burned with quiet defiance. Levi's hand hovered near his blade. Hang tilted her head slightly, observing every twitch of Emer's expression. And Erwin Smith, face unreadable, took one deliberate step forward. Outside, the fields Locke had once nurtured swayed gently in the wind, serene, indifferent to the storm that was about to begin inside that small wooden room. Chapter 94. In a remote village northeast of Karanis, near the ruins of Wal Maria, silence ruled. The life that once filled the streets and farmlands had long since vanished. All that remained was the slow, uneven shuffle of titans. Some wandered clumsily between houses, others pressed their massive forms against walls, their upper bodies wedged deep inside structures they could never have entered as humans. A few stood frozen, half buried in the wreckage of their own homes, their twisted faces mimicking humanity in a grotesque parody of life. Then, clang! A grapple hook struck stone, slicing through the still air. A figure shot upward, propelled by the hiss of compressed gas and the pull of taut cables. The three-dimensional maneuver gear whirred, and in a blink, the soldier landed atop the roof of an old windmill. Swish! The flash of a blade, and the titan clawing at the windmill's side collapsed, its nape sliced open cleanly. It hit the earth with a sickening thud, steaming into nothingness. The nearby titans turned their heads in eerie unison. Their empty eyes sharpened with hunger as they lumbered toward the lone figure standing against the wind. Before they could close in, streaks of movement cut through the air. More Survey Corps soldiers descended from above, their blades carving clean arcs through flesh and sinew. Within moments, 5 titans lay dead around the base of the windmill. The squad regrouped on the roof, the smell of burnt steam thick in the air. At their center stood Locke, now leading his squad on a reconnaissance mission in the northeastern region. From the top of the windmill, they could see everything: the ruined fields, the half-collapsed homes, the titans littering the streets like scattered shadows of a massacre. The scene was wrong. Deeply wrong. Aluo broke the silence first, voice strained with disbelief. What the hell is this? Why are there so many titans here all at once? ELD's gaze swept across the landscape, sharp and uneasy. It's not just the number, he said. Look at them. They're off. According to the reports, lightning struck somewhere near this area not long ago. This village was right on that path. Gunther adjusted the grips on his blades, his brow furrowed. I've had a bad feeling since we got here. It's not just them, it's this place. The air feels wrong. Locke's eyes followed the sluggish titans moving below. His expression hardened. You see it too? The one stuck halfway into buildings? The others looked closer. Realization hit all at once. Some titans weren't outside trying to break in, they were inside, jammed awkwardly through walls and doors. Their mangled torsos jutted from ruined homes, arms flailing in blind confusion. ELD's face tightened. That's impossible. Titans don't shrink. They couldn't have fit through those doors. Unless... He stopped, the thought too grim to finish. Locke finished it for him, voice cold. Unless they came from inside. The squad fell silent. The truth hung heavy in the air. If Locke was right, these weren't titans that had wandered in from beyond the walls. These were the villagers, men, women, even children, transformed. Locke exhaled sharply. Don't dwell on it. Our mission is reconnaissance. Record everything you see. I'll scout from above. The others nodded, though the weight of his words lingered. They all knew what it meant. And they all knew Locke's strength was unlike theirs. Fighting beside him was both an honor and a risk. Protecting them slowed him down, yet he refused to abandon his squad. Within the Corps, only 2 others matched him, Captain Levi and perhaps Mikasa Ackerman. Together, they were humanity's sharpest blades. Locke launched off the windmill and soared across the rooftops. The world blurred beneath him as he moved silently through the ruins, scanning the village from above. The truth became undeniable. Everywhere he looked, titans bore remnants of their former lives, clothes half-torn, hands still clutching the objects they'd once owned. A mother's shawl. A child's toy. A ring. Locke's jaw clenched. So it's true. Forced injections. They turned them all. His mind pieced it together quickly. The warrior unit's mission, their infiltration, had all begun like this. Reiner, Annie, Bertolt, mere children sent to commit unspeakable acts, turning innocents into titans to breach the walls. Locke had once thought himself beyond their kind, untouched by their cruelty. He had believed he could change the world through will alone. But this village was proof that the world cared nothing for will or hope. Reality was merciless. And yet, it demanded clarity. Reiner, Annie, Bertolt, they weren't demons. They were victims of their own twisted cause. But sympathy was a luxury the battlefield didn't allow. They are enemies. And enemies must die. As a soldier of the Survey Corps, as someone born in Shiganshina, Locke could not afford hesitation. Even if those warriors carried sorrow in their hearts, as long as they threatened humanity, they had to be destroyed. His hand brushed the vial of Titan spinal fluid hidden beneath his uniform. Its faint weight grounded him, a grim reminder of what power meant. Next time I face Reiner and the others, I won't hesitate. Titans must belong only to those we can trust. A low rumble shattered his thoughts. Crash! The windmill behind him exploded outward as the Titan trapped inside finally forced its way free. Half of the structure collapsed in a storm of wood and dust. The sound carried across the entire village. Dozens of Titans turned their heads in eerie synchrony, their necks twisting unnaturally toward the source. Then, with horrifying speed, they began to run. Aluo, ELD, and Gunther barely had time to react before the horde was upon them. Locke's voice tore through the air. Damn it! Without a second thought, he fired his grapples and launched himself forward. The rooftops streaked past as he flew toward his comrades. They were already fighting, blades flashing, ODM gear hissing with gas bursts, but the Titans kept coming, faster, hungrier, some moving with the erratic bursts of aberrance. Locke dove into the fray. Steel met flesh. Steam exploded around him as he carved through Titan after Titan, his movements fluid, precise, merciless. He didn't hesitate, didn't flinch, even knowing what these monsters had once been. Pity was a weakness they couldn't afford. All that mattered was survival. And so, amid the chaos, Locke fought, each swing of his blades carving a path through despair itself. The windmill's remains burned faintly in the background as the corpses of Titans dissolved into vapor. Far from the carnage, hidden in a patch of dense brush beyond the fields, a pair of eyes watched. Cold. Unblinking. Calculating. They observed every motion, every kill, every flash of light from Locke's blades. And they did not move. Chapter 95. The attack came without warning. A deep, guttural roar tore through the air, so sudden and violent that Aluo, ELD, and Gunther froze mid-motion. Before any of them could react, the sound had already drawn a swarm of Titans from every corner of the village. In an instant, they understood how dire their position was. The windmill, barely 5 meters tall, offered no cover worth mentioning. It boxed them in, limited their mobility, and, worst of all, turned them into a shining beacon for every Titan within earshot. There was no time for hesitation. Only survival. Blades drawn, the 3 soldiers steeled themselves. If they didn't fight, they'd die. Their only hope was that Locke would return before they were overrun. They didn't have to wait long. PSSHHHT. Compressed gas hissed. Cables snapped through the air. A figure shot into the fray like a streak of silver, Locke. His maneuvering gear roared, propelling him with inhuman speed as his twin blades flashed in the fading light. Each motion was precise and devastating. One after another, Titan napes burst open in clouds of white steam. Locke! Aluo shouted, his voice lost in the thunder of combat. Bodies fell fast, but the horde was endless. The narrow space around the windmill worked against them, too confined for wide sweeps, too many blind spots. Titans pressed from all directions, their sheer numbers threatening to smother the 4 of them completely. Locke cut down another, blood and steam spattering his cloak. Before he could reposition, a massive hand lunged from his blind spot, clamping around his right ankle. For the first time that day, Locke felt the cold shadow of death. Aluo! ELD roared. Behind him. Locke! Gunther's voice cracked with panic. Gritting his teeth, Locke swung both blades downward in one brutal motion. Steel tore through flesh and bone, severing the Titan's thick fingers. The grip loosened instantly. Without pause, Locke fired a hook into the windmill's roof and triggered his gear. Gas screamed, wrenching his body upward and free of the Titan's grasp. Ha! He landed on the roof, chest heaving. Relief came sharp and brief. Below him, the Titans surged again, their vacant eyes locked onto him with mindless hunger. No room for recklessness. No heroics. Locke adjusted his approach. He darted around the structure in controlled sweeps, circling the windmill with surgical precision. From above, he struck downward, blades flashing in rapid arcs, severing necks one by one. Every kill thinned the encirclement. ELD caught on immediately. He's clearing the ring, push inward. The others moved in perfect sync. Aluo, Gunther, and ELD struck the Titans closest to them, forcing open a path toward Locke's line of attack. Hard-won trust guided their movements. Every strike, every dodge, felt practiced, a rhythm forged in countless battles. Together, the four carved their way through the mob. Steam and blood filled the air, the stench almost unbearable. Finally, they reached their horses, mounted, and rode hard, breaking free of the ruined village as the last Titan fell. Behind them, over 20 corpses hissed into vapor, the remnants of the slaughter vanishing into the sky. Ha! Ha! Even Locke, with his inhuman stamina, felt exhaustion clawing at him. His arms burned, his ankle screamed, and his grip on his blades slipped from sweat and blood. Still, a flicker of gratitude passed through his eyes. The upgraded weapons had held. Without them, the steel would have shattered long ago. If Locke was tired, the others were on the verge of collapse. ELD's posture sagged, Gunther's breathing rasped, and Aluo barely managed to stay upright in his saddle. Their cloaks were soaked through with blood, some their own, most Titan. Every motion betrayed pain. Half an hour of hard riding brought them clear of the Titan zone, but safety was an illusion. For the first time, Locke truly felt the edge of mortality, how close death had brushed him. He flexed his injured ankle, pain lanced up his leg, sharp and immediate. One glance at the others told him they were just as battered. Each bore wounds, some shallow, others deep. Aluo's was the worst, a ragged gash tearing through his thigh, blood soaking his uniform. His face had gone ghost pale. Locke made the call. "We stop. Find shelter." No one argued. Karani's was far behind them, returning before nightfall was impossible. And pushing on through Titan territory, half dead and low on fuel, was suicide. Rest wasn't a choice. It was survival. They found an abandoned watchtower, a crumbling garrison outpost of stone and rust. Its walls still stood, though scarred by time. Compared to the fragile windmill, it was a fortress. They staggered inside, sealing the entrance with debris before finally letting themselves breathe. Aluo collapsed almost immediately, consciousness slipping away. ELD and Gunther, pale and trembling, barely remained upright. Locke alone kept moving. He knelt beside Aluo, opening a field pack for bandages. ELD steadied the wounded man's leg while Locke pressed cloth into the bleeding wound and wrapped it tight, his movement steady despite the fatigue. By the time they finished, the hiss of spent gas was the only sound. Their canisters were empty. Outside the walls, injured, exhausted, and with no fuel left for their gear, their reality was clear. Still, none of them had died. For that, Locke allowed himself a quiet moment of relief. Inside the watchtower, silence pressed heavily. The kind of silence that amplifies every heartbeat. Locke sank against the wall, lifting his leg to examine the swelling. Pain throbbed sharply through the joint. Sprain, he muttered to himself, recalling field medicine. No fracture. He exhaled, a slow release of tension. A broken bone out here would have been a death sentence. ELD rubbed his shoulder, grimacing. Got slammed into a wall dodging one of those bastards. Hurts like hell, but I'll live. Gunther flexed his wrist with a wince. Sprained mine too. Cuts and bruises everywhere, but nothing fatal. Locke nodded once. Good. Then, after a moment's pause, he asked, that roar earlier, did any of you see what caused it? ELD shook his head. No. Just heard it. Then every Titan turned and rushed us like they were being called. Gunther swallowed hard. It wasn't natural, Captain. That sound, it pulled them. Like something was controlling them. Locke's gaze darkened. A name surfaced in his mind. Annie. His jaw tightened. If it was her, why hadn't she revealed herself? Why only the roar? Was she watching? Hesitating? Uncertainty gnawed at him. Annie Leonhardt, her loyalties were still a mystery. She could already be with Reiner and Bertolt, or she could still be wavering. Either way, the danger she posed was absolute. He looked around at his squad, wounded, drained, stranded. With no gas left, their greatest weapon was useless. Responsibility pressed on him like a weight. We survived this time. But the next? He forced the thought down. Despair had no place here. They would recover, endure, and fight again. Outside, the sky darkened. The land beyond the wall, Maria sank into silence once more. But somewhere in that silence, unseen eyes still watched. Chapter 96. Fortunately, the watchtower had once belonged to the garrison regiment. Its lower levels still held an old armory, dusty, but intact. After some searching, Locke unearthed spare gas canisters, maintenance tools, and replacement parts for their ODM gear. With that discovery, one of their most critical problems was solved. But two remained: how to return safely to the walls, and when Alua would wake up. Night fell soon after. The air grew colder, the fire's orange glow flickering across the cracked stone walls. Outside, the wilderness of Wall Maria stretched silent and still, save for the faint creak of wood and the distant, eerie groans of wandering Titans. Locke sat near the fire, its warmth brushing his face as he spoke in a low, steady voice. After dinner, you two rest first. I'll keep watch. His tone left no room for argument. ELD and Gunther exchanged glances. They both knew Locke was just as exhausted as they were, perhaps more so, but neither protested. The gratitude in their eyes spoke louder than words. They'd fought beside him long enough to know what kind of man he was. Locke wasn't leading them because of rank. He led because he carried their lives as if they were his own. That sense of responsibility, unshakable and quiet, was what made him their true captain. How laughable it seemed now, remembering those who had sneered at his promotion. Those men could never understand. Only those who had faced death beside Locke knew the truth: his strength wasn't just in skill, but in resolve. So they obeyed. After cleaning their gear and finishing the meager rations, ELD and Gunther lay down by the wall, sleep taking them quickly. Locke stayed by the fire, methodically polishing his blades, his gaze fixed on the darkness beyond the window. The campfire crackled softly. Beside it, Alua lay still, his breathing faint but steady. Locke adjusted the blanket over him, keeping the fire bright enough to ward off the chill. A fever here would kill faster than any Titan. I hope you don't do anything foolish, he muttered, fingers tightening on the hilt of his sword. His eyes never left the dark. He had trained too long under the moonlight to fear the night. In darkness, his senses sharpened. His mind steadied. If Reiner or the others appeared now, he was certain he could strike them unseen. And if he fell, ELD, Gunther, or even Alua could inherit what he carried. The thought, grim as it was, brought him calm. The line would continue. Hours passed. The fire burned low. Outside, the plains were swallowed by mist and shadow. Locke's gaze stayed steady until the first pale light of dawn crept across the horizon. The gray morning revealed empty fields, scattered Titans wandering in the distance, but no enemy warriors. For now, the night had passed without blood. Locke moved quietly downstairs to tend the horses, feeding them from a dusty bundle of hay left in storage. Each motion was deliberate, careful. He waited. Especially for Aluo. Without a cart, they would have to strap him to a saddle if he couldn't ride on his own. That would slow them down and increase their danger tenfold. He only hoped the man would wake soon. Far to the east, at the broken edge of Wall Maria, 3 figures stood among the ruins. Annie Leonhardt. Rainer Braun. Berthold Hoover. Reunited at last. "You're late," Rainer said, his voice hard, the faint trace of command in his tone. Annie's cold eyes met his. "You're one to talk," she replied, pointing toward the Titan-infested village below. Her voice carried a sharp edge. "Did you do that?" Reiner's gaze didn't waver. "Don't forget who you are, Annie." Bertolt shifted uneasily, his tall frame tense. "We had no choice," he said quietly. "We needed a distraction, to draw attention away and slip inside the walls. It was the only way to complete the mission. Only then can we go home." "Home." Annie gave a small, bitter laugh. Such a beautiful word. Her voice dripped with something between mockery and grief. Reiner's expression darkened. "Your thoughts are dangerous." "So what?" she shot back, turning away. Her eyes fixed on the distant village, the same one Locke and his team had barely escaped the day before. She remembered watching from the trees, silent, unseen. She'd seen them fight. She'd seen them bleed. And she'd hesitated. If she'd acted then, they would all be dead. She told herself it was a strategy. She told herself it wasn't weakness. But the truth lingered, something inside her refused. "Those brats, still alive, huh?" she muttered under her breath, her tone half sneer, half self-contempt. "Next time, I won't be so merciful." Rainer and Bertolt exchanged a silent look. Annie's moods were a riddle they could never solve, but they trusted her. She would do what was required. She always did. Still, a shadow passed between them. A quiet unease neither dared to voice. Back at the watchtower, the first rays of sunlight broke through the clouds. Locke and the others had just finished breakfast when a groan echoed from the corner. Aluo stirred. "You bastards." His voice cracked with irritation. "Eating without me? Trying to starve me to death?" Locke blinked, and then, for the first time in days, laughed. "Still got that foul mouth? Good. Means you're not dying yet. Think you can ride?" "Of course," Aluo snapped. He tried to stand, and winced immediately, nearly collapsing as pain flared through his thigh. ELD and Gunther exchanged grins. "Sit down before you embarrass yourself," ELD said, handing him a bowl of steaming porridge. "Eat first," Gunther added. "You'll have plenty of chances to complain later. Don't underestimate me, idiots." Aluo barked, but he still took the bowl, leaning against the wall with a smirk. His bravado couldn't hide the relief in his eyes as he dug in, savoring each mouthful. The simple act of eating warm food, shared laughter, restored something none of them realized they'd lost, the will to keep going. After breakfast, they repacked their gear, filled their gas tanks, and prepared to move. Aluo could ride, barely, and that was enough. They set out cautiously, moving more slowly than usual to match his pace. The journey was tense, every shadow suspicious, every sound amplified. But luck, rare as it was, favored them. Titans were sparse along the route, and those that appeared were swiftly dispatched. By midday, the cracked rooftops of Karani's district appeared in the distance. The wall wasn't far now. Then, from behind a ruined barn, a lone 3-meter Titan stumbled into view. Locke's hand went to his blade immediately, but then he remembered. A promise. He glanced toward ELD. "Draw it here," he said calmly. ELD hesitated only a moment, then nodded, understanding what Locke intended. Hang had asked for a live specimen. And Locke intended to keep his word. Chapter 97, in the Karani's district, a massive elevator slowly descended from the 50-meter-high wall. Garrison soldiers at its base stood stiff and tense, sweat beading on brows, every hand near a weapon. Their unease quickly drew the eyes of civilians nearby. Never before had they seen the garrison this on edge. A crowd gathered, murmurs swelling as they strained to see what was being lowered. When the platform came into view, gasps erupted. Bound on the carriage below was a titan, its grotesque form resembling a swollen, twisted human. What is that thing? It's a titan. A titan inside the walls. Why would the garrison bring one in here? Wait! Look, someone's standing beside it. That insignia, the wings of freedom. That's a Survey Corps soldier. Captured? They actually captured a titan? Impossible, or, no, look for yourself. It's right there. The crowd rippled with fear and disbelief, voices colliding in shock. Bang! The elevator thudded onto solid ground. Soldiers stationed on the wall above let out shaky sighs, backs slick with cold sweat. Transporting a titan inside the walls was unthinkable, but today, it had been done. It seems titans aren't as terrifying as we thought, one garrison soldier muttered. Hannes, standing nearby, only shook his head. His eyes lingered on Locke, blade drawn as he kept watch beside the restrained titan. In a low voice only he could hear, Hannes whispered, "It's not that titans aren't terrifying. It's that Locke is too damn strong." At first, the garrison command had flatly refused to allow the titan's transport into Kuranis. The risk was too great. If it broke free, the district would face disaster. To prove his control, Locke had ridden out alone, slaying 5 titans wandering near the wall. Only then did the officers relent. On one condition, Locke himself had to remain by the captured titan's side until it left the district. He agreed without hesitation. All that mattered was getting it through. When the titan-laden carriage rolled forward, the murmuring crowd instinctively parted, leaving a clear path. Their fear saved Locke the trouble of shouting orders. After ELD and Gunther rejoined with the horses, the squad prepared to depart. Noticing the eyes on them, ELD swallowed nervously and leaned toward Locke. "Captain, maybe we should cover it? People are panicking. If this sparks a riot." Gunther nodded in agreement. "It's too conspicuous. A cloth would calm them down." Aluo said nothing, his face pale from pain. His wound had reopened during the ride, blood soaking fresh bandages, yet he had refused to complain. Locke's expression hardened. "No. We'll march it openly through Kuranis. People need to see it." His voice carried, directed not just to his squad but to the crowd around them. "The Survey Corps has the strength to kill titans, and even capture them. Let civilians, garrison soldiers, and the complacent cowards in the military police all see this truth: titans are not invincible." ELD hesitated. "But Captain, what if?" "There's no problem," Locke cut him off. His eyes shifted to Aluo. "As for you, you're going to a doctor. Now." "That's an order." Aluo blinked, startled by the command, then saluted weakly. "Yes, Captain." His pride made his face twist more than the pain. "Don't get sentimental," Locke muttered, annoyed. "Gunther, ELD, take him." With that, he climbed onto the carriage, sword drawn, and resumed guard at the titan's side. Should its limbs heal, they would sever them again without hesitation. As ELD and Gunther guided Aluo toward a clinic, the titan was paraded openly through Kuranis. Eyes followed it everywhere, fear, hatred, awe. Locals who had never glimpsed a titan shrank back in horror. Refugees from Wal Maria, however, glared with burning hatred. When Aluo re-emerged from treatment, bandaged and steadier, a small knot of refugees blocked the carriage's path. They were not content to simply watch. "Sir," cried a man in his 30s, his voice raw with anger. "What will you do with that titan?" His eyes blazed with the same hatred mirrored in those behind him. Locke met his gaze evenly. "We will study it. Test it. Learn its secrets, so that in future battles, we can destroy them more effectively. Remember this. He turned toward the watching crowd, raising his voice so all could hear. Titans are not invincible. Humanity will walk beyond these walls again. One day, we will reclaim our freedom. The street fell silent. Even the refugees, mouths half open, could not speak. With a sharp signal from Locke, ELD urged the horses forward. The crowd parted without resistance, their eyes locked on the departing soldiers until they vanished from sight. Only then did voices rise again, not in despair, but in something long forgotten. Hope. Those who had fled from Wall Maria, once hollow-eyed and broken, now clenched fists with renewed fire. The Titans could be defeated. And freedom was not just a dream. Chapter 98. Just as ELD had predicted before, without blocking the Titans, Locke and his team inevitably drew attention wherever they went. Most people inside the walls had only ever read about Titans in books or heard about them through hushed accounts. Seeing those creatures with their own eyes was entirely different. It was raw, terrifying, and unforgettable. But what shocked them even more was the sight that followed. The Titan, said to be an unstoppable monster, was shackled and dragged along by a boy no older than themselves. A single soldier, young yet unflinching, had reduced a nightmare into something bound and powerless. The fear that clung so deeply to the people's hearts began to loosen, even if only slightly. Those who witnessed it firsthand would not collapse in terror the next time a Titan appeared. Perhaps they still wouldn't have the courage to fight, but at the very least, they might run instead of freezing in place. Sometimes, that was the difference between life and death. After 5 days of exhausting travel, Locke and his team finally reached the Illumia district. The familiar banners of the scout regiment flew in the wind, and in that place, they reunited with Commander Irwin and Captain Levi. When Irwin stepped out to see them, his sharp eyes immediately fell upon the restrained Titan Locke was hauling along. Though he had received word of this long before, the reality was far more striking. For a moment, even the ever-calm commander was silent. Then, as if piecing together the intent behind Locke's actions, Irwin's lips curved slightly. "I can't read him anymore," Irwin murmured under his breath. "His thoughts are reckless, unrestrained, yet always with a purpose beneath. Sometimes I wonder, if he were to lead in my place, perhaps he would be more suited than I. He would never remain passive, never hesitate when faced with the unknown." Levi stood behind him, arms crossed, his piercings being hauled on Locke and his group as they entered the base. He snorted. "Don't start idolizing him," Levi replied flatly. "Not yet. His ideas jump too far, too fast. That kind of unpredictability is dangerous in our situation." "You admire him, though," Irwin countered lightly. Levi's expression didn't shift, cold and impassive as ever, but his eyes betrayed him. They hadn't moved from Locke since the moment he stepped through the gate. Irwin chuckled under his breath, amused by the contradiction. "Admire," Levi muttered, finally tearing his gaze away. "Something like that." Yet in his mind, a sharper thought took root. "Let's see how you break the news to him about Emer." Soon after, Locke, ELD, and Gunther entered the familiar office. Aluo had been sent straight to the infirmary. His wounds, while not fatal, required urgent treatment. "Commander, we've returned," Locke said with a small, confident smile. "I'm glad to see you back safely," Irwin replied, returning the smile before his eyes hardened slightly. "How are your injuries?" "The three of us managed with only scrapes and bruises. A few days' rest was enough to recover," Locke reported. Aluo, however, took a harsher blow. "He'll need time." At Locke's signal, ELD placed a thick folder of reports onto Irwin's desk. Locke gestured toward it. "All the information we gathered is here. Our journey ended in a village infested with Titans. Not a single villager remained. My guess is that they either fled, or they were eaten." Irwin's brow furrowed slightly. "And your own thoughts? You want me to be direct?" Locke asked. Irwin nodded firmly. "Always." Taking a slow breath, Locke continued. "The houses we found were damaged, but not in a way that suggests Titans broke in from the outside. The walls were caved outward from within. And many Titans were stuck inside homes, bodies wedged and unmoving. Titans can't fly, so there's only one conclusion I can draw. Erwin leaned forward. Go on. Levi, standing at his side, sharpened his gaze. Each of Locke's guesses had led him to the truth before, and his instincts told him this time would be no different. Locke's eyes hardened. Those Titans didn't come from outside. They were once villagers. Transformed. ELD and Gunther inhaled sharply, their faces pale. The thought was unthinkable. Yet, when they considered the evidence, the conclusion wasn't so easy. His expression barely changed, but his eyes darkened. Erwin, though he had prepared himself for this possibility, still felt the weight of the words sink into his chest. Are you certain? Levi asked quietly. No, Locke admitted. But the likelihood is high. I can't explain the method of transformation. Not yet. But the signs all point to it. The room fell silent, a suffocating heaviness pressing down on them. ELD and Gunther exchanged uncertain glances, still reeling. Erwin finally exhaled, breaking the tension. A bold idea, he admitted softly. And disturbingly plausible. His eyes flickered with conflict before he schooled his face into calm once more. After a long pause, he straightened in his chair. This theory cannot be confirmed at present, so we'll set it aside. For now, there is another matter I must entrust to you, Locke. Though I regret to say, it is not a pleasant task. You don't need to explain further, Locke said calmly, cutting him off. I already know. Erwin blinked. You won't even ask what it is? There's no need. Just give me the order. Erwin's composure cracked for the briefest second. He studied Locke carefully, the calm resolve in his expression, the absence of doubt. Slowly, he nodded. Then you've already guessed. It is about Emer. I'm sorry, Locke. I broke my promise to you. Chapter 99. The Survey Corps' base, at the entrance to an underground stone cell. Locke. I'm sorry. Hank's voice was heavy with guilt. Locke raised his hand, gently stopping her from saying more. His calm eyes met hers, and for a moment, the burden on her shoulders seemed to ease. I know this wasn't your choice, he said quietly. And I know it was bound to happen sooner or later. Don't carry the weight of it. This time, I've brought you a new specimen. It's in your lab already, something unusual. Focus on that. He offered her a reassuring nod before turning and pushing open the thick wooden door. The hinges groaned, and the air inside shifted. The cell was not the dark pit he had expected. Instead, it was surprisingly bright, a single torchlit chamber carved carefully into the earth. The space stretched nearly 100 square meters, one large room fortified with stone and iron. Clearly, it had been built to hold someone too important, or too dangerous, to risk escape. Erwin must have ordered this built recently, Locke thought as his gaze swept the walls. The reinforced structure, the narrow underground corridors, everything spoke of caution, secrecy, and purpose. He didn't dwell on it further. Nodding once to the stone-faced guards standing at attention, Locke stepped inside. At last, his eyes fell upon Emer and Petra. Emer sat with deceptive ease, her posture relaxed, her eyes sharp and unflinching. Petra, by contrast, seemed tense, her hands clenched against her knees, her entire body betraying unease. The sound of Locke's boots on stone made them both look up sharply. The moment Petra saw him, she sprang to her feet. Locke! You're finally back. Please, Emer doesn't belong here, she isn't a threat. She shouldn't be treated like this. Her words tumbled out in a rush, her worry plain. Locke's gaze steadied her, calm but unyielding. Petra, take a breath. Settle yourself. He stepped closer to Emer, studying her carefully. His voice lowered. Why did you choose me? Emer rose, meeting his stare without flinching. Her answer came firm, each word deliberate. Because I trust you. My gut tells me you've already figured out who I am, but you've done nothing. That means you see value in me. You know I can be useful. Locke's lips curved faintly. Then, are you willing to work with me? Her eyes narrowed slightly. Work with you, she repeated, stressing the word. Locke only nodded. He stood there without his gear, completely exposed, yet calm as though nothing could touch him. Petra's eyes widened at their exchange. Locke. Emer, what are you? Petra, leave us, Locke and Emer said at the same time. The synchronicity made both of them glance at each other, a flicker of awkwardness breaking the tension. You. Petra's voice cracked. A strange hollowness spread through her chest as she looked at them. It was a feeling she hadn't expected, like watching something precious being taken away. She bit her lip, but in the end, she obeyed. With one last glance, she stepped out, leaving the chamber to the two of them. The heavy door shut. For several moments, silence hung between Locke and Emer, broken only when she finally spoke, unable to contain herself. You know more than you should. Far more. Locke's eyes did not waver. There's no need for games. I know enough. And yes, I know you carry blood from outside the walls. But I'm not from there myself. Emer froze. Her composure faltered, a flicker of surprise flashing across her face. You shouldn't know that. No one here should. Locke's calm expression remained unchanged, his voice measured. Then call it a guess. Will you believe me? Her instinct screamed to deny it, to push back against his certainty. But his eyes, steady, relentless, made the words stick in her throat. After a moment, she exhaled and nodded slowly. I can only choose to believe. Locke's gaze sharpened. You're clever. So I'll ask again. Will you work with me? The question lingered. Emer lowered her eyes, sinking into silence. Locke didn't press. He stood in stillness, waiting. He knew what she was weighing. Emer was not someone who trusted easily, her world had been built on betrayal and survival. And yet, in this place, she had almost no one. Petra, perhaps. And Locke, barely. Beyond that, nothing. It wasn't trust she considered, it was a necessity. Minutes stretched, the silence thick. Finally, Emer raised her head, her voice low but firm. I'll agree. But on one condition. Petra comes with me. I only trust her. Of course, Locke said without hesitation. Petra is part of my squad. He extended his right hand, a faint smile softening his features. Then, welcome to my team, Emer. Emer's acceptance carried a weight beyond her words. Even Levi, had he been present, might have muttered in irritation at Locke's audacity. Emer's eyes searched his for a beat longer before she clasped his hand. Her palm was cold, but her grip was steady. I hope this isn't a mistake, she said. Trust me. You won't be in danger here, Locke promised. His expression turned grave. Not while you're with me. I'll stake my life on it. Her eyes narrowed. That's a bold guarantee. And a true one, Locke said firmly. Emer studied him for a moment more, then finally let go. Then. I'll believe you. For now. Locke gave a single nod and turned toward the door. Come on. You don't belong down here. Emer followed closely, her eyes lingering on his back. For the first time in years, a faint smile ghosted across her lips. Maybe following this one won't be such a bad thing after all. The knot in her chest loosened. Her secret remained unspoken, but for now, her identity and her life felt a little safer. When they reached the door, the guard shifted uneasily, glancing at Emer and then back to Locke. Captain Locke, this doesn't seem. I'm acting on Commander Irwin's orders, Locke interrupted bluntly. His tone left no room for argument. The guard straightened, stiff as a board. Understood. And with that, Emer stepped back into the sunlight. The warmth struck her face, and she drew a deep breath. The air above ground felt different, open, alive. Freedom, fragile though it was, wrapped around her shoulders like a cloak. "Locke, is Emer all right?" Petra hurried to her side, eyes searching both their faces. "She's fine," Locke said simply. "But she'll be coming with me from now on. There's something important she has to do." Petra frowned. "What do you mean?" Locke's gaze flickered with something unreadable. "Transform." "Transform, what?" Petra's eyes widened, utterly confused. Emer gave a small, wry smile at his bluntness. "You're in such a hurry, Captain." Her tone was teasing, but beneath it lay the weight of unspoken truths, the kind that would soon shake everything. Chapter 100. Behind the Survey Corps' base, deep inside a secluded valley with only one entrance, Erwin, Levi, Hang, and Mike stood fully armed, waiting for Locke and his companions to arrive. At the narrow mouth of the valley, nearly 100 Survey Corps soldiers maintained strict vigilance, weapons drawn and eyes sharp. "It's quite a grand arrangement," Locke muttered, glancing at the soldiers. Then he turned toward Emer and Petra, who both looked visibly nervous. "Don't worry. These are just precautions. Nothing will happen." "I believe you," Emer said firmly. Her unwavering tone made Petra, who had been about to speak, hold back her words. After passing through several checkpoints, Locke and his group were finally led into the valley to meet Erwin and the others. Erwin, visibly relieved at their arrival, approached with Levi, Hanji, and Mike at his side. "Locke, you finally made it." "Sorry to keep you waiting, Commander." Locke's gaze swept across the valley before he said bluntly, "Shall we begin right away?" "That would be best," Erwin replied. He wasn't one to waste time. Locke turned to Emer. "If you're ready, transform." "Yes." Expressionless, Emer stepped toward an open area. Petra tried to follow her, but Locke stopped her. "You stay here." "What do you mean, Locke?" Petra whispered. She clearly had no idea of the truth. Locke softened his tone. "No matter what you see next, don't panic. Emer is still Emer, she hasn't changed." Petra frowned, confused, but Locke said nothing more. Erwin and the others ignored her entirely. If not for Locke's insistence, Petra wouldn't have been allowed to witness this at all. Matters concerning Titans were secrets tightly guarded, even the royal government hadn't been informed. Petra bit her lip but stayed silent, watching Emer walk dozens of meters away. Emer paused, then turned her calm eyes back toward them. For the first time, Petra felt that her friend seemed distant, no longer the girl who had always followed her like a shadow. But the moment for doubts passed quickly. Locke gave Emer a small nod. Taking a deep breath, Emer pulled out the blade he had given her earlier and sliced her palm. Lightning split the air. The thunderous roar shook the valley, forcing everyone to narrow their eyes against the blinding light. Hanji, eyes wide with fanatical excitement, stared at the forming silhouette, completely forgetting her earlier guilt. When the steam cleared, a Titan stood before them, 3 to 4 meters tall, with jagged teeth flashing and elongated claws gleaming like blades. Locke stepped forward calmly, unflinching. Emer's heart surged with emotion at his composure. Glancing at Petra, who stood frozen in disbelief, Emer sighed inwardly. Locke looked up at the Titan before him, his lips twitching slightly. "Is that all?" "What do you mean by that?" Emer's Titan voice rumbled, sharp with offense. The words sent a ripple through Erwin's group. They rushed forward, weapons at the ready, staring at the small Titan with alarm. "She can talk? A Titan that speaks?" "Her form. It's different from the others. The armored, the colossal, the female, all with unique traits, and now this one with claws." The flood of questions left Emer momentarily speechless. Locke cut in smoothly. "I know you all want answers, but let's ask one at a time. Emer only has one mouth." Standing with his back to her, Locke made it clear he trusted her completely. That gesture stunned Erwin, Levi, and the others. Petra's face, however, betrayed turmoil. She could no longer look at Emer the same way, her hatred of Titans ran too deep. Emer noticed the change in Petra's expression. Sadness flickered inside her, but Locke's calm presence reassured her. He hadn't wavered at all. Even though Erwin and his officers had expected this, the reality of watching a soldier transform into a Titan before their eyes was overwhelming. They stood uncertain, unsure of what to ask first. Locke broke the silence. "Come out, Emer. Speak to us directly." The Jaw Titan's guttural voice echoed, and Emer pulled herself free from the nape, emerging in human form as the Titan's body dissolved into steam. The Survey Corps officers stared in amazement. Hanji rushed forward, pressing her hands against the dissipating Titan flesh despite the searing burns. Her ecstatic expression made it clear, pain was nothing compared to the thrill of discovery. Emer stood tall before them, exhaling heavily. Then, with quiet resolve, she began to recount her truth, her origins, fragments of Marley, the memories inherited from the Jaw Titan, and what she knew of Reiner, Berthold, Annie, and the mission that had brought them all here. That's the end of this tale for now. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in part 6. Peace.